I confess. Let's play hardball. Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews down in Washington. Let me start tonight with this nutcase up in Pennsylvania, this Republican leader who declared out loud what Democrats have been saying for months, that these new laws making it harder to vote, requiring government-issued photo ID cards and other moves are aimed at getting Romney and other Republicans elected. How rare it is when the perpetrator of a political scheme confesses its political nature. And that's what Majority Leader Mike Turzai did this weekend. He blew the cover. So much for good government. He admitted the whole scheme was to win. Let's get to this GOP leader in the Keystone State and other states, this plan to kill off the older voters and others who might be planning, how dare they, to vote for Obama. Pat Murphy served as Democratic congressman from Pennsylvania's 8th District. Jim Byrne is the chair of the Democratic Party of Pennsylvania. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us this weekend. Just to set the table, at the Republican State Committee meeting in Hershey, Pennsylvania, House Republican leader Mike Turzai championing legislation Republicans have passed and then came out with what a lot of Democrats have been saying for a while, and it is a ha-ha moment for everyone. When he seemed to confirm, damn it, he did confirm suspicions that Pennsylvania's new voter ID law is not about stopping fraud. Oh, no way. It's about stopping President Obama. Let's listen to the guy give it all away.
We are focused on making sure that we meet our obligations that we've talked about for years. Pro-Second Amendment, the Castle Doctrine's done. First pro-life legislation, abortion facility regulations in 22 years, done. Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania, done.
You know, Chairman Byrne, not only did he say it out loud that it will allow their candidate to win, but actually it will allow Romney to carry Pennsylvania, this new voter requirement that requires the rather difficult efforts like going out if you're 80 years old and finding some place to get an ID card made by the government with a picture on it. And then they go out and applaud the guy. This wasn't any secret. All those Republicans in that room, Republican activists and party regulars, were cheering a guy who had just said, we did this thing to win an election, not to stop fraud.
No surprise on our side of the aisle there, Chris. Quite frankly, we knew all along this was nothing more than a Republican scheme to attempt to win and to tip the scales. But having said that, we have a very good ground game. We were prepared this year, like every year, to bring out the vote with a better ground game than our opponents. As we implement that ground game this fall, we will remind folks who may be affected by this decision, this new law, of what they need to do to vote, and we will help them to achieve the credentials they need if necessary.
Well, people watching right now from states like, well, let's start with Pennsylvania. What should they do to be able to vote? If they look in their, hey, look, I haven't driven a car in 20 years. I don't have any government affiliation. I don't have an ID card with my picture on it issued by the government. What should they do, Mr. Chairman? Forget, this isn't partisan. What should a person in that predicament do?
We would ask any Pennsylvanian who has a question right now about whether or not they have the necessary papers, unfortunately, to vote, to go to our webpage, www.padems.com/vote. And as we canvass, Chris, and as they go to our webpage, we will drill down with them to see if they have what it takes to vote in Pennsylvania right now. And if they don't, we will make sure they have it. Either we will take them ourselves to get what they need, or if they can make arrangements to get to where they need to go to qualify, we'll make sure that happens. And then we will circle back with them as we get closer to the November election to be sure not only...
Yeah, go ahead.
Not only will they have what they need to vote, we'll get them there to vote if we have to.
And just to bring it down to local level, if you're a big city Democrat or Republican in any big city, go to your committee person. They'll help you out. That's the way to do it. Pat Murphy, thanks for joining. This is an amazing assault. I mean, this is an attempt to keep people who are older, people who are poorer, who don't have the money to go out and to go find the Penn Dot or wherever you have to get the DMV. It's frankly DMZ. Talk about it.
And also college students. I mean, most of the colleges like Penn State University, University of Pittsburgh, they cannot use their college ID to show proof of who they are. I mean, we're talking about 700,000 people just in Pennsylvania disenfranchised. And basically, Majority Leader Turzai getting caught talking to his base. Chris, this is offensive. To think that we have men and women who have fought and died for the right to vote, I look at my experience in Iraq. The fact that I served with heroes who gave their life, who never made it home, so that in 2005, people in Iraq, 12 million people, could vote for the first time. Yeah, we all remember those purple fingers. The fact that here at home, we're chipping away at democracy. Our vote is sacred.
Okay.
And I think that they just basically, this isn't a game.
Congressman, I want you and the chairman of the party up in Pennsylvania, because I don't think there's a partisan issue except on the Republican side. I would think everybody wants to vote. Everybody should want everybody to vote. People that don't want certain people to vote are up to something. Here's a spokesman, pretty weak gravy coming out of this guy. Turzai spokesman said, quote, Representative Turzai was speaking at a partisan political event. That's supposed to defend him. He was simply referencing for the first time in a long while the Republican presidential candidate will be in a more even keel thanks to voter ID. Anyone looking further into this has their own agenda. Your response to that, Chairman Byrne?
That's ridiculous. Mr. Turzai has tripped over his tongue once again. This time he has shown what the true intent of this piece of legislation was. Chris, in the last 32 years in Pennsylvania, hundreds of millions of votes cast, less than 10 alleged cases of voter abuse. Mr. Turzai and this Republican governor, Corbett, have found $11 million to fix a problem that doesn't exist while they cut education and attempt to cut it upwards of 50%.
Well, it's interesting, Pat, let's go over this number. Let's take a look at how the parties break out. This is not viewed positively by the Democratic Party. It is overwhelmingly viewed positively by the Republican Party. Look at these numbers now. 91% of Republicans who are registered voters love this thing. A majority of Democrats, 53, oppose it. What's that about?
That's about basically the talking points that they're hearing from their leaders. And the talking points from the Republicans are, we want to make sure that there's no fraud. So do we. If anyone commits fraud, there's already rules in place and laws in place to put them in jail. This is simply to disenfranchise people. They're doing two things. One, they're disenfranchising folks when they show up in 4 months, but also to say, well, maybe you shouldn't even show up. There's the other intent there as well.
Right. People say,
if my vote's not going to count, remember Florida in 2000, how important every vote counted, and Pennsylvania being a battleground, which is in play, where we need every single vote to get out there. That's why that website, gottavote.com, or the padems.com websites are the two critical ones.
Let's talk about how this is important. Chairman Byrne, you're chairman of the whole political party of Pennsylvania. I want you to look at this number here right now about how close Pennsylvania is. I actually think it's closer than this. Quinnipiac has it at 46-40 for Obama. I think that's getting very close to the margin of error. And my sense is there's some people in there that aren't being square right now. I think it's a tough as hell election. And my thinking is this. Why would any voter out there who is truly nonpartisan want to make an 80-year-old person who doesn't drive a car, hasn't driven one in 15 years, doesn't get involved in public affairs issues where you have an ID card, doesn't travel the world with a passport, why not let that person vote? And a lot of people have to drive a cab or take public transportation to vote. It's hard. This makes it even harder and more expensive. Let me ask you about how close could they grab Pennsylvania like this guy just said, Turzai? That was the main point of his statement. With this new voter ID card, a big state like Pennsylvania with 20 electoral votes can be snagged, poached, if you will, by the Republicans.
They're not going to poach anything in Pennsylvania. We have a better field plan, and whether or not they attempted to pull this chicanery or not, we were going to have people on the ground, and we will have people on the ground to get out the vote and make sure everybody who wants to vote can and will vote. But, Chris, I would suggest that those numbers may be further to the president's advantage in Pennsylvania. I've been to many of our counties over the last couple of years, and this cycle in particular, this Republican presumptive nominee does not connect with Pennsylvanians. And if it hadn't been for the Tea Party not being able to get its act together between either Mr. Gingrich or Mr. Santorum, I would suggest, despite his hundreds of millions of dollars in campaigning for 6 years, he would still be in a primary fight. They know they have a weak candidate. They're doing everything they can to create diversion and to try to disenfranchise voters.
What's weak about him?
He does not. What's weak about him? 47 out of 50 in job creation in Massachusetts. Bain Capital, running businesses into bankruptcy to make profits. Not being able to connect with average Pennsylvania voters. Failing to step up and take a statement on any significant issue. Rather, he would kick the can down the road and point to the president. The president has had the courage to step up and make difficult decisions. All that this candidate can do is criticize this man's leadership. He has no plan of his own.
You're the best surrogate we've had on for Obama. We can't get cabinet members or senators to talk about you. You ought to be running the surrogate operation, because that's a really good distillation of what the hell the problem of Romney is.
Exactly. Chairman Byrne, exactly right. The people of Pennsylvania, a manufacturing state, do not want another outsourcer in chief. I mean, that is what Mitt Romney's record is. He went from 36th in the country, Massachusetts, to 47th, the very last, the bottom of the bottom. I mean, this
made a lot of money.
He made a lot of money, but let me tell you something. A lot of middle-class families lost their jobs because of his outsourcing.
We're going to get to it later in the show again, but I want to thank you both. What you raised is going to be a big part of our discussion tonight, Mr. Byrne, Jim Byrne, the chairman of the Democratic Party of Pennsylvania. And the point is that nobody seems to like Romney. The ones who are thinking of voting for him, and it's a lot of people, is they're concerned about the economy, but they don't like him personally. He is not registering on the scale. Anyway, thank you, Pat Murphy, former congressman from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, Jim Byrne from Allegheny County, now statewide chairman of the Democratic Party of Pennsylvania. These guys are going up in the road here.